stand right there. Here we are.
See? Can you hear? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this press conference with participation of His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi. And my name is Charlie Weimers. I'm the Vice Chair of the European Conservatives and Reformists Group and a proud friend of the Iranian people. Today, His Royal Highness has met with MEPs from several different groups, sharing his vision of a future secular and democratic Iran. And one point that I will take to my fellow legislators here in the European Parliament is the need to support the Iranian labor movement. Many Iranian workers are struggling under almost slave-like situations in our IRGC-owned entities, and they are suffering a lot. And the need to support them in some way, by a strike fund maybe, that is something that the European Union should look into, because as the Crown Prince stated, we have an opportunity to seize assets of the IRGC abroad, just like we are planning to seize Russian assets abroad to use for the reconstruction of Ukraine. We should use this money to create a strike fund for Iranian workers, to enable the Iranian people to put an end to this regime. Another thing that I would like to take the opportunity to say is that European leaders should listen to what was said today, and they should invite the Iranian opposition to meet with them, to recognize the Iranian opposition, to recognize that there are concrete plans for a transition to a democratic, free Iran. This I call Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, to do. I call Charles Michel, President of the European Council, to do. I call upon every European government to do so. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to His Royal Highness. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Weimer. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, good afternoon. Throughout the last almost couple of weeks, those of you who have followed my various mediatic intervention by now must have heard most of the answers. So what I'm going to say is, if there are any new questions you would like to ask me, I'm here to respond to them. And so, in order not to waste time, how about we start with whoever wants to start with your questions.
The lady here from Independent Persia.
Your Majesty.
Good afternoon.
I'm still emotional from your beautiful words to really, and your speech.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
10 minutes before. Then I memorized everything, but I have to read and this.
That's fine.
Your Majesty, you have made a lot of efforts to draw the attention of the whole world, especially the Europe countries, to Iranian people's desires, actually one desire, to support the Iranian people to try to fight with this regime.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Somehow we still see that the Europe countries have a kind of dual policy. For example, the recent visit of the Iran's foreign minister to Austria. Then how we can count or rely, on the Europe with its dual policy? Thank you so much.
Sensitive question. Well, first of all, no one from our end expect a complete cutoff of diplomatic communication, which is always an instrument necessary to exist. The question is, at what level do you treat that? kind of diplomacy when flagrant behavior such as taking citizens of other countries hostage as a bargaining chip, to what extent are you going to tolerate that? Like, if you remember after Mykonos, what happened, and a lot of ambassadors were called back or their diplomats expelled, it's not cutting complete communication, but it's downgrading the level of diplomacy as an indication, as a symbol of not tolerating that kind of behavior. So rather than to question whether there is communication, is how they treat the level of diplomatic contact and bring it to the lowest level possible as a sign that we will not tolerate that kind of behavior. That should be indicative of how much they esteem that type of relationship as opposed to treat it at the highest level of diplomacy. That by itself could tell everyone in public opinion where it is that it stands in terms of seriousness. And conversely, the fact that they are now engaged in dialogue with representatives of the opposition is also an indication that they are not limiting their dialogue just to the regime, but they are finally brought into the equation, talking to the other side. And I think the more we go in time, probably the balance will tilt even more. So this is a start, and it's a good start, and we welcome that, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Shahriar Siami from Radio Farda, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Have you ever tried to negotiate with the European leftist party? Do you think they support you, European leftist party?
Well, I always am open to dialogue with anyone. So from my end, I'd be happy to. The question should be posed to them, are they willing to have at least a conversation? So I leave it up to them. But from my end, I'm always prepared to talk to anyone because I believe in dialogue, and it could be sometimes actually constructive or beneficial. I don't have any prejudice. Perhaps they do, but I don't.
It's a follow-up to Shahriar's question on the action coming on international TV, and it's a concern that pushing it. Is it on?
Oh, yeah. So it is. I've been reporting for past 6 months in different countries in Europe and in North America. It's a concern that so many Iranians raise, especially younger generation, and they said that, for instance, are you willing to sit down and negotiate with parties that they might have extreme ideas, for instance, against immigrants, just because you're against Islamic Republic of Iran? Or do you have any consideration regarding these matters?
Well, I want to understand the implication of the word negotiation. I'm talking about cooperation towards a common agenda. Because what's there to negotiate? Are we making a decision for the people? We're not. We're not mandated for that. We're here to support the cause towards the only mechanism that is the one deciding on the future of Iran, which is a constitutional assembly formed by people's representative elected to that parliament. So the negotiation happens at that time in terms of finding the most appropriate outcourse, and eventually when you disagree, it's the ballot box that defines what the majority think of. So I don't look at this as a negotiation. I'm talking about, do we have a commonality or purpose? Is there a charter with basic principles that we can all agree on that defines the basis on which we can cooperate? So it's really what's your disposition to those principles rather than a bilateral discussion that is like we're trying to make deals with one another as if we are trying to decide something for others. Since we are not mandated to decide for the people, we are not in a position to negotiate anything. We can only propose a process. It's a process that will have to answer those questions as opposed to whatever we want to decide here.
The man in the back.
I am Nordin Fridi from Al Arabiya News Channel. Your Royal Highness, I had the chance to meet Mr. Ardashir Zahidi, peace on him, because he was the man who ratified the protocol when Iran joined the NPT treaty. So your father started the nuclear program, or under, let's say, under your leadership. I followed your intervention, and specifically on the nuclear program. You said very interesting things. Could you please clarify again your view on the nuclear program? should this program be stopped, dismantled? Because as you said very well, there are seism, threats, etc., that we have alternatives with the renewable energy, etc. So could you clarify your view on the nuclear program? This is one thing. Second, Iran is under a permanent threat from Israel. And Iran is playing a very destabilizing role in Yemen, Lebanon, supporting the Syrian regime, etc., etc. I think you did not clarify to the European assistance audience what is your view, what should be the relationship between Iran and its neighbors. I don't know if I can have another remark, if you may allow me.
You could, but I may not remember everything you asked me. Okay. If you allow me to at least address these 2 points. The first point being the nuclear issue. As I said, it's my personal opinion. I'm not suggesting that's the policy of future government. It's not for me to decide that. It's for those governments to make policy. But if it was my personal opinion and recommendation, I have always had a negative view of the nuclear program, even its civilian applications, because exactly what you picked from my argument, that I don't think my country lends itself to be able to securely address the issue, being for the reasons and potential ecologic calamities following that, which will not affect us but everybody in the immediate neighborhood. And again, we're talking about this 40 years later, almost 50 years later, from where it was first considered as an alternative. And as I said, today there are so many alternate renewable energies that are safe and clean that makes much more sense for us to develop than sticking to an, in my view, outdated nuclear program. At much more efficiency and lesser cost, and certainly with no risk of environmental consequences. But it's also a confidence-building reason, because the antagonism led by the current regime in Iran against our neighbors, whether it's the Israelis or the Arab countries, from the very beginning set a bad tone and taste in the region. Obviously, a completely different Iran means a completely different demeanor, a completely different relationship. And in that sense, I'm sure that our neighbors will recognize that the Iranian people, first and foremost, understand that in order to bring stability, we need primarily to establish that kind of a standard. And as a result of that, enter in true partnership, true cooperation, and true mutual trust. That is the only path to address many challenges that we will collectively have to face. Again, I remind everyone how critical the water crisis and the environmental crisis following that could be as an element of stability, completely outside of ideology of politics, simply on environmental issues. And we need to work together the problem. It's not only an Iranian problem. It's a problem in Yemen, it's a problem in Oman, it's a problem in other countries. We need to address this, and that's where Europe ought to consider the ramification of resolving the problem, because in large part, I think more migration towards Europe may occur as a result of that crisis alone. And Europe, already saturated, cannot afford to have that happen. So in order to expedite the process of rectifying the problem, it ties back to how soon we can get rid of this regime. So the emergency aspect of the sooner we get rid of this regime, which will instantaneously, by the way, eliminate many threats, just not the nuclear threat, but what about terrorism? What about supporting their avant-garde in Syria or Lebanon, or all their presence in a negative impact in the region, even all the way to the European territory? It goes without saying that everybody benefits from that change. That's where you bring back some relief away from the concerns, and the mindset turns back towards a totally different direction. But we need to see that happen. That's why I keep saying to the whole world, while there's still time, without having to resort to more radical measures to eliminate the threat. You already have the most immediate natural army in place, which are the Iranian people, right here, right now, fighting the fight. What they need is that extra push and that extra help to finally push the regime over the cliff, and that's when we get rid of it.
The gentleman in the front.
با درود، بهنام محمدی هستم از کیهان لندن. شاهزاده رضا پهلوی، با توجه به دیدارهای این تور اروپایی فکر می‌کنید دولت‌های اتحادیه اروپا و همچنین دولت بریتانیا تا چه اندازه متوجه واقعیات در ایران و عزم و خواست مردم ایران برای جایگزینی جمهوری اسلامی با یک نظام دموکراتیک شدند؟ مرسی.
به فارسی جواب بدم؟
ممنون میشم.
خب ببینید، هر چقدر بیشتر وارد گفتگو با ما بشن، درک بیشتر از قضیه براشون فراهم خواهد شد، تا اینکه فقط متکی باشن به اخباری که به دست میارن یا میزانی از اطلاعاتی که دستگاه اطلاعاتیشون بهشون میرسونن. ما اگه بتونیم بهشون نشون بدیم که عمق این مسئله به چه شکلی است، از نظر ساختاری، از نظر نهادهایی که در درون کشور میتونن در این راهکار موثر باشن، خب طبیعتا درک بهتری پیدا خواهند کرد از اینکه به چه شکلی اولا میتونن کمکی برسونن و به چه شکلی ما میتونیم این کار رو در داخل ایران انجام بدیم. اگر سوالی باشه راجع به اینکه خب خلایی ممکنه ایجاد بشه پشت سر این به اصطلاح از میان رفتن نظام، بعدش چی میشه، خب هر چقدر بیشتر ببینن که مثلا ابزار کار در درون کشور کجا هستن، کیا هستن که میتونن این خلا رو پر بکنن، طبعا یه مقدار آسوده تر به قضیه نگاه خواهند کرد تا نگران باشن که پس از تغییر معلوم نیست چه اتفاقی بیفته. و از این لحاظ خب این گفتگوها بسیار لازم هست و خوشحالم که بالاخره شروع کردن یه صحبت جدی با ما داشتن، چون اتفاقا همین سوالی که شما از من میپرسید سوالاتی بود که از من کردن تو این جلسات این چند روزی که داشتم، به هر حال چه در فرانسه چه در انگلیس، و دقیقاً اینو سوالات رو کاملا میبینم که کنجکاون که بدونن، بهتر بفهمن، بهتر درک بکنن و فقط میتونه در نتیجه اینو صحبت‌ها و تبادل نظرها باشه که بهتر بتونن نحوه این تغییر رو درک بکنن و ابزار کاری که لازم داریم در این راهکار.
The lady in the front.
Good afternoon. Sarah Dama, Voice of America, Persian. How will the IRGC collapse in the Iran? Do you have any suggest method?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Will do IRGC?
IRGC?
Yeah, collapse in the regime. Do you have any suggest?
You mean how do we see that happen?
Yeah.
Well, again, let's understand a few things. The first thing is that the top echelon of the IRGC that is economically vested in interest, because that's their source of revenue as an organized mafia controlling every aspect, including the economic sector in Iran, are the ones who benefit from this arrangement. But the bulk of the IRGC are not necessarily having any financial gains as a result of being members of that organization. They are salaried people earning their living, doing a job. In the context of further sanctioning of the IRGC, in terms of putting them on the list of a terrorist organization, it does address, from the domestic point of view and the foreign point of view, crippling their ability of further repression at home or conducting whatever sinister ends that they carry out internationally. But there's also an added element that I was trying to explain to legislators that could in fact expedite the process of regime implosion. Understand that many of them, particularly if labeled as such, will have to weigh into the equation how long can we and for what purpose should we stick around with this regime, and maybe think that it is a time to consider exit and defection from the regime. Provided, of course, that they realize there is a path to survivability beyond the regime. The reason we are maximizing the opportunity for defection on the path of truth and reconciliation, on the path of transitional justice, is to say that the bulk of them can survive regime change and find a place for themselves in the future, as opposed to we are stuck with this regardless and we have to go down fighting with this ship. psychologically and pragmatically, they will have to respond to this added pressure. I believe that, in fact, it helps us create more incentive for defection than the current status quo. So it's, I think, a win-win proposition to have this instrument as more reason to cause defections, while you're also crippling the IRGC for every negative impact that they have currently domestically and abroad.
We have time for a few more questions. The gentleman on the side.
Thank you very much for giving me the time. My question is for you, Honorable Charlie Weimers. Two questions, actually. Your party, SND, in a recent poll showed one of the highest the most popular party among Iranian diaspora in Sweden. What's the message of today's meeting to Iranian Swedes diaspora, first of all? And second thing, this match, the historical event of today, took more than 4 years. Was there any obstacle from the European side, or is there any green light for today's event, or it was another issues not from the European? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Now, when it comes to the Iranian diaspora in Sweden, we are very much appreciative of the support in my party, and we have 3 Swedish Iranian MPs, one of them being here today, Mr. Rashid Farivar. Now, I would like to say that what they can do, my message would be keep pushing the Swedish government to take the lead. As you know, as the country that currently has the presidency of the European Union, of the European Council, Sweden should take the lead in calling for a new Iran policy of the European Union, starting with the proscription of the IRGC. Now, there is a majority in the Swedish parliament in favor of that. So Swedish Iranians should ask the government, what are you waiting for? And they should tell them, just like they told me 15, 20 years ago, that the future of Iran will be so much brighter without this regime. I understood it long ago, but some people still not getting it. So that they could do. Now, in terms of resistance to this event, I would say that politics always consists of different wills, and you know as well as I do that there are some who do not want events like these happening, and of course the regime doesn't want it to happen. They don't want a representative of the Iranian opposition to be on stage in the European Parliament. But I must say that my team's cooperation with the administration of the European Parliament has been brilliant. So I'm very grateful for this cooperation, and I think a token of that is the fact that I was able to present a gift, protocol gift official from the European Parliament to His Royal Highness that is on the level of heads of government, heads of state. And that's, I think that's a very important signal from this House to the European Commission, to the European Council, and to the outer world that Europe is getting ready to engage truly with the Iranian opposition. So this I will bring from today. So the gentleman in the middle there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prince Reza Pahlavi, for your speech today. My question is for Mr. Weimers, actually. Prince Reza Pahlavi talked about the absence of a campaign of maximum support in place of maximum pressure. And one of the main demands, and one of the very vital demands of the Iranian people, as we hear from inside the country today, is access to free information and to the internet, right? Because that's what helps them to connect to one another and to find each other, especially the dissidents. What have you done as an MEP, and if you are aware of any will in the European Parliament to push that forward and provide the Iranians with the internet?
Yes, this is a very crucial issue. It's not an easy one, because I've been told that satellites enabling internet access in Iran from outside are, sorry to say, not too hard to fight for the regime. So we need to look at the pure logistical side of that in order to make it happen. The European Parliament, I've been part of calling for the European Union to work together with tech companies to enable internet access, VPN, and this will continue. I have a good relationship with the Iran spokesman of the biggest group in this House, the EPP, and we are both very much in favor of the EU working for this. So we are aware of obstacles, but we realize the importance, together with strikes, to make the Iran revolution successful. So this I will work in favor of. Okay, so I'm giving the gentleman in the middle of the last question here because we need to go to the next meeting.
Sorry. So, Your Majesty, thank you very much for the speech.
Thank you.
I have two questions, quick ones, relating to unity in the Iranian opposition, because as Mr. Weimers noted, the great European fear is Iran becoming a Syria 2.0, and Syria happened because its opposition lacked unity. So the first one is, do you think that your status as a monarch is something that will help unify the Iranian opposition? And on the other hand, what are certain things that you are afraid that may be divisive for the Iranian opposition? Thank you.
Well, first of all, those who are familiar with my position, whether they are monarchists or Republicans, understand that in order to be a coalition builder, I have to be above the fray and neutral as an agent of transition, as opposed to be projected in one way or the other. Otherwise, it will be biased, and when there's bias, there can't be neutral grounds. And I have offered my role, and in fact, I have defined my mission in life to be an agent of transition to the day that the final referendum by the Iranian people adopting the proposed constitution by our constitutional assembly will be end of my political mission in life. So I'm not running for any office. Therefore, I'm not competing with anyone. And in that sense, I would like to try to remain neutral. There are monarchists who want me to become the next king. There are Republicans. Some of them say, no, you should become our president. And to both, I said, listen, let's not talk about offices right now. Let's understand the process. And I'm not running and leading a campaign. This is how I get monarchists and Republicans on board, because the agenda here is not to define the political structure and form of regime outcome. We are here gathered to work together towards a political and democratic process that will be responsible to define what the ultimate outcome is. So we are not here to impose an alternative. We are here to propose a democratic transitional process towards an alternative. And as such, we can all work together while remaining true to our own ideological preferences, which does not bar us to work together at this stage towards that common goal.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will have to end this press conference right now because people are waiting for His Royal Highness. I want to thank you for coming, and my sincere hope is that this is not the last time Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is here in this building. So I say to you, until next time. Thank you.
Merci, Asami. Thank you. Thank you.